Alright guys, in this video we will be creating our timer, and you know that the whole idea is to create a timer so that we can generate coins with a set interval. So that we generate some coins, we wait a few seconds, we generate more coins, we wait a few seconds, we generate more coins, and so on and so forth. And the time between these generation events where we spawn new coins, it is of course set here in this variable called time between spawns. And this variable is set in coin spawner through the inspector window. You see that here we set it to 5. So right now time between spawns will be 5, and we need to create a timer that will execute a piece of code each 5 seconds basically. So to do that, we need to work in our update function. You know that this update function is running approximately 60 times per second. Why is it so? Well, because the game is running at 60 frames per second. So your game engine will update the screen 60 times per second, and it will show you a new image on the screen 60 times per second. And we call that frames, that the game is running at 60 frames per second. And this function will be called on each frame. Now, it might be the fact that you have a slow computer and the calculation to generate the next frame takes longer than 1/60th of a second. Because you understand that if we are to draw a new frame on the screen 60 times per second, it means that we need to take 1/60th of each second to calculate. So 1/60th of a second to calculate how the next frame is gonna be looking like. And of course that involves physics, it involves player input, it might involve also networking if you have an online game. So all of the calculations needs to be done in 1/60th of a second, and then you can draw the frame. Obviously sometimes, as I mentioned, you might be having a slow machine and then your frames might be dropping. I mean, if you have a very complicated 3D environment and you have shaders and you have crazy graphics and you have a lot of resources that you need to handle in your RAM memory, well, your frames will be dropped. So you will have lower frames per second, or FPS as it's called. So while 60 frames per second is the desired FPS, it might be lower. And so when you're developing games, it's always important to know how much time has passed since the last frame. It's always important to keep a track of how much time has passed since the last frame. And you do that by a special variable called time.delta. And this is something that you can actually print to the screen. So by having this value time delta, you know how much time has passed since the last frame. And this is usually used when you have a game with some kind of character, and then you want to ensure that the character moves equally fast on all computers. So that if it is the case that you have a fast machine and you can do 60 frames per second, and you want to move the character, let's say 60 pixels, on a machine, and you move let's say you just move 1 pixel per frame, on a machine that runs 60 frames per second, you will move 60 pixels in 1 second. But on a machine that only does 30 frames per second, well, it will take you 2 seconds to move 60 pixels if you only move 1 pixel per frame. So it's always important to keep time delta in mind, so that if your computer is lagging, you have a low FPS, well, then you increase the movement each frame, because in games you always want things to take equal amount of time without depending on the performance of the machine. So that if it is the case that the machine is slow, well, then the game is gonna lag, but the character is still gonna move equally much. So that you cannot have a fast machine and basically cheat the system. Or if you have a slow machine, you have a disadvantage. But in this case, we will be using time delta in order to know how much time has passed since we last generated our coins. So let's just print it to the screen and see what's happening. Let's see, we have some errors. Delta is not recognized. Let's see, time does not have a definition of delta. Interesting. Let's see if we have, yeah, all inputs are correct. time.delta, oops, sorry. It needs to be, of course, delta time. I have a cheat sheet here to the to the right. So delta time is basically how much time has passed since the last frame. And if you just print it, you see how much time has passed since the last frame. And it's usually 0.016, 0.017. So you see it's not exact. It's not the same every time, but it's approximately 0.016. And something that is interesting is if you go and you take 1 divided by 60, this is what you will get. So you take 1 second, you divide it by 60 frames. So each frame has this much time. And then the next frame needs to be drawn. So that is why you get these numbers here in the console, approximately 0.016. Okay, good. So that is working. And now we need to check how much time we have to the next spawn. So each frame we will subtract this delta time from the time we have until the next spawn. And then basically when this variable reaches 0, so when time to next spawn is less or equal to 0, then we will say timer is up, like this. And when timer is up, we of course want to reset the timer. So we set time to next spawn, and then we set it to time between spawns. So basically reset it to the original value. So let's see if it works. Now we should see text here on the screen each 5 seconds. So we wait for 5 seconds. We see text on the screen, timer is up. We wait for 5 seconds. We see on the screen that the timer is up. And of course, you remember that we can change it to 1 second here in the inspector. I mean, this is really the beauty of Unity, that you code something and then you can manipulate it through the inspector. So now this should happen every second. Let's see. Boom, 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 boom. Yes. So guys, that is how that works. And next video, next lecture will be about generating coins, so that when the timer is up, instead of just printing some text, we will be generating coins. So I'll see you guys in that next lecture.